the numbers all go to 11. Look, right across the board. 11, 11, 11, and...
Oh, I see. And most amps go up to 10?
Exactly.
Does that mean it's louder? Or is it any louder?
Well, it's 1 louder, isn't it? It's not 10. You see, most blokes, will be playing at 10. You're on 10 here, all the way up, all the way up, all the way up. You're 10 on your guitar. Where can you go from there?
I don't know.
Nowhere. Exactly. So what we do is, if we need that extra little push over the cliff, you know what we do?
Put it up to 11.
11, exactly. 1 louder.
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These goes to 11. Welcome to Your Pick, a film podcast. I'm Geneva.
And I'm Tatum.
We are 2 friends who love movies and love sharing them with each other. Each week we take turns picking a film that is close to our hearts and talk about why it moves us, to tears, to laughter, and everything in between. We celebrate the craft of filmmaking, as well as the unique and personal ways we find meaning in the movies we watch. Back again, Tatum, only a few days after our last recording. Have you watched anything new in the interim?
I'm checking right now. Nope, I have not.
Yes.
I've just been watching a lot of YouTube, to be honest, because I haven't had hours of free time. It's more so I only have 30 to 40 minutes. And so I'm like, I'll just turn on some YouTube, whatever stuff. But yeah, I haven't watched anything. How about you?
Yeah. Pretty similar. I've not logged anything new. I did come home yesterday from work to find my roommate watching the Banshees of Inisherin, which was great.
Ooh, first time?
First time for her, yeah. So I sat down and finished it with her, and oh my goodness, what an incredible movie.
Oh, it's so good. I need to rewatch it.
You should.
I haven't seen it.
It's on Hulu right now.
I haven't seen it since it was in theaters. Yeah, it was on HBO Max for a while, and then it moved over, and yeah. Actually, no, I own it now that I think about it.
Wait, you own it on DVD?
Yeah. I got it from a family member who gets the for your consideration DVDs.
Oh, nice.
And so I think I'm pretty sure that's one of the ones that I have.
Oh, that's awesome.
But anyway, yeah.
Well, great movie. Anyone who has out there who has not seen it, highly recommend. It is so well written. The acting is incredible. The themes and the discussion that it inspires is great. And it's also just very funny in a very dark way.
Very darkly funny.
Yeah, which I tend to forget because it is so heavy in certain ways, but it's also very, very funny. So yeah, the Banshees of Inisherin.
Before we started recording, Geneva and I were talking a little bit about specific memes or whatever. And I saw this meme a few weeks ago that was, it had half of the top half of the graphic was Brendan Gleeson, and the bottom half of it was Colin Farrell, and the top half of it was Brendan. Sorry, I'm really describing this poorly, but the concept is writers their feelings towards their screenplays, or it's their screenplay talking to the writer. Or no, sorry, I'm explaining this really poorly. So the top one is Brendan Gleeson, and it's the writer talking to the screenplay. And then the bottom one is Colin Farrell responding. And so the top is, I just don't like you no more. And then the bottom one is, but you liked me yesterday.
We've all been there.
Anyway, I described that super poorly, but that was a meme that I saw that I really liked.
I got it. Anyone who's seen the movie will understand what you mean.
Yeah.
All right. Well, should we get straight into the movie? I got to be honest. I'm very excited to talk about this movie, but I also feel like I don't really know what we're going to talk about because
I feel like we've said that so many times, and every time we manage to talk for an hour and a half.
We're very good at talking about movies.
Even if we're not saying anything, we still are saying stuff.
Yeah. This is our first kind of, I guess, straight, pure comedy that we've done since Monty Python and the Holy Grail. We've done other comic movies, but kind of combined with other genres. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like a lot of this discussion is just going to be me going, And I love this scene. I love this scene. Anyway, let's get into it, though. Today on the show, we are discussing This Is Spinal Tap from 1984, directed by Rob Reiner, written by and starring Christopher Guest, Michael McKean, Harry Shearer, and Rob Reiner. The film centers on the fictional British rock band Spinal Tap and their disastrous U.S. tour, in which the band's plummeting popularity is accompanied by onstage mishaps, changes in management, and inter-band squabbling. The idea for the film began with the creation of the fictional band Spinal Tap, referred to as Britain's loudest rock band. In 1978, Guest, McKean, Shearer, and Reiner all collaborated together on a TV sketch show pilot that included a fake music video. Guest and McKean improvised the characters of Nigel Tufnell and David St. Hubbins, the self-absorbed British rockers at the center of Spinal Tap. Over the years, they kept coming back to these characters, and gradually the idea arose to make a comedy in the style of the rock band documentaries, or rockumentaries, that were becoming popular at the time. Their inspiration was films like 1967's Don't Look Back, about Bob Dylan's England tour, and 1978's The Last Waltz, about a Thanksgiving Day concert by the band. The film This Is Spinal Tap would be played straight and filmed to look as realistic as possible, causing many audience members at the time to think it was about a real rock band. Because of this, the film helped to pioneer the genre of the comedic fake documentary, inspiring later movies like Popstar, Never Stop, Never Stopping, and shows like Documentary Now. The film was Rob Reiner's directorial debut. He would later go on to direct classics like The Princess Bride, A Few Good Men, and When Harry Met Sally, which we did an episode on a few weeks ago. All the dialogue was improvised by the actors, with the exception of a speech given by Sir Dennis Eaton Hogg at the record launch party. All the music was written and performed by Guest, McKean, and Shearer themselves. All right, so this is
Can I just say real quick?
Yeah, please.
I literally was, when I was going to share about my relationship with this movie or whatever, my initial thoughts on it, I was literally going to say how this movie reminds me of Popstar, Never Stopping, and Documentary Now. Literally, those were the two things that I was going to say.
Great minds think alike.
So that was really funny that those were the two that you mentioned. Have you seen either of those?
Mm-hmm. Well, I've not seen all of Documentary Now. I've only seen a couple episodes here and there, but I've seen Popstar, Never Stop, Never Stopping a couple times.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I love that movie. It's very funny.
It's a great movie. Oh, we should talk about that on the podcast at some point.
I would be down.
Not the Beast! It's the Queen!
That whole song he has about how the Mona Lisa is overrated.
Oh my God. It's a great movie.
Anyway. Okay, so Spinal Tap is a movie that I grew up with. It's like a family favorite. I remember even before seeing it, my mom just describing certain scenes to me and cracking up, which I have now carried on that tradition because I will try and get all my friends to watch this movie and I'll start describing scenes and then I start cry laughing and they're just kind of looking at me confused because they've no idea what I'm talking about.
Like what?
Yeah, I feel like this movie is, I don't know, among our generation, maybe not quite as known as some other comedies of this era. I might be wrong about that. I might just be hanging out with the wrong people. But yeah, I love this movie so much. I feel like it's a very particular style of humor, and I think it can probably be a bit divisive. It is very, very dry. It's very much like we are just going to play everything absolutely straight. Every character in this believes absolutely in who they are and what they're doing, and the humor comes from the fact that they are so self-absorbed and all of these terrible, cringy things are happening to them. I just find it hilarious. This morning, as I opened up the quotes page to try and find the quote the IMDb quotes page to try and find the quote that I wanted so I can put it in our outline, I was just started reading through all the quotes from this movie and I was cackling with laughter, and my poor roommate outside my room was probably wondering what was happening. But yeah, I love this movie. I find it hilarious. Tatum, was this your first time seeing this movie?
Yes, it was my first time seeing this movie. I've heard about it before. I'd heard about it several times throughout the years. But yeah, it was never a movie I was shown or anything like that. So I had somewhat of an idea of what this was going to be getting into it, but yeah, it definitely was a fresh experience. So, like I said before, this definitely is something that reminded me of Documentary Now in particular, because Popstar Never Stop Never Stopping, it is like a mockumentary of a musician, but it's not like dated in terms of trying to replicate things we've seen in the past. It just kind of feels like its own thing. Whereas Documentary Now is like, it starts out with legitimately mocking actual documentaries, and then it goes off in its own way, but it's still trying to kind of capture a specific era. And so I feel like this movie kind of had a similar sort of vibe. I definitely did have a feeling while watching this that I wish that I had seen this when it came out, before this type of humor existed, because there was part of me that was like, oh, I've seen this before. This doesn't feel entirely unique to me. Whereas I feel like at the time it was probably groundbreaking.
Yeah. Well, it's like the old Shakespeare. He's such a cliche,
right? Yeah. Yeah. So I found myself wishing that I'd kind of seen it with fresh eyes, not having any sort of other reference for it, like for the genre. But that being said, I did have a lot of fun with it. These types of things, including Documentary Now, they're not really things that I laugh out loud to. They're just kind of movies that I sit back and I'm just like, this is so dumb. What's wrong with these people? And so the fact that I didn't laugh out loud doesn't mean that I don't think it's funny. I think it's very funny. It's just like weird. And so, yeah, I mean, I think I'm glad I watched it. I think it's a funny movie. But for me, it doesn't really stand out as like a very spectacular experience, because it doesn't feel unique to me. I've spent hours upon hours of watching this type of vibe through seeing every single episode of Documentary Now. So yeah, I will say the part of this movie that I found the funniest was the part that you saw me watching, actually, the ending, where it's just like, I wanted to write down the things that I thought were the funniest in that final sequence, but all of them were so funny and I couldn't keep up, because it's just like 3 minutes of just utter nonsense. So that's definitely my favorite sequence of the movie, because, which I think is cool, that a movie, at least for me, ended on a note where I was like, oh, this is really going out with a bang. So yeah, I'm glad I watched it. It was a fun time. There were some surprises in there, like getting Billy Crystal as a mime for like 5 seconds was super random.
And apparently I read one of the articles that I read, Dana Carvey was the other mime, like possibly pre-SNL.
Was he really?
Yeah.
Oh, I did not make that connection. But yeah, I liked hearing your little tidbit though about how all of the dialogue was improvised. I did not know that. So I honestly would like to watch it again, knowing that that's the case. I feel like it would be funnier to me. I wish they would have said something like that at the beginning, of like, everything you're watching is improvised, because I feel like I would have thought it was
What
funnier.
are you talking about? Everything you're watching is a completely true capturing of the band Spinal Tap and their tour. And
well, no, I mean like improvised versus scripted, like having something written that they're then acting out, as opposed to like just making it up on the spot. Also, the fact that they performed all the music, I mean, I guess it's kind of obvious that they are, but yeah, I don't know. They're clearly very, very talented people.
Yeah.
So I had a fun time with this. It was a fun time.
Good. Yeah, I'm glad you liked it. It is kind of funny when it's like, you're so familiar with the descendants of the thing, and then you go back and watch the original thing, and you're like, well, I know what this is because I've seen this done so many times. But yeah, this is like the grandfather of the very cool uncle of that entire genre.
Right.
Yeah, so like I said, I'm not quite sure how to structure this conversation. I mean, we can kind of go roughly chronologically just to give it some sort of structure. All right, so the structure of the movie, as we've said, is a documentary, a fictional documentary, but the director of this fake documentary, who is played by Rob Reiner, the director of the actual movie, this character named Marty DeBurgi, I think. So it opens with him, and he's talking about how he discovered Spinal Tap, and then throughout the movie, we keep cutting back to this interview with the band members where they talk about the history of it. And I love these sequences because it keeps cutting back to fake footage of supposedly the band back in their sort of 1960s folk and psychedelic pop eras. And just the music that is written for this movie is just, it's so good. It's so, like, you can tell that the creatives involved in this movie who are writing the music, they are genuinely extremely talented, and they do such a great job of mimicking the sort of musical style of each of these eras. So they have this sort of like folk song that they're playing in the 60s, and it's very like the footage is all grainy black and white to look like the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show. And then they have this like sort of psychedelic flower power, listen to the flower people song, which is just, it's so colorful and cheesy and hilarious. And then obviously in their sort of 80s like rock metal era, all the songs are just completely ridiculous, but they also kind of legitimately slap. Like, there are a lot of genuinely really good songs, even though they're also ridiculous, in my opinion.
I think that, and I could be reaching here, but I feel like this might have been what they were doing, because I'm familiar with, I'm fairly familiar with rock music of this era, and I feel like they were very directly trying to imitate actual musicians at the time. Like, there is one song where I was just thinking, he is literally doing a Mick Jagger impression from the Rolling Stones. Like, that is what this is, and I feel like they're intentionally doing that. And then there was another song that sounded very much so like the Eagles, and I'm like, okay, this sounds like the Eagles. And there were certain things that seemed more Pink Floyd influenced with this stupid idea of the freaking stone. I'm like, what is this Stonehenge? Why? This is so weird. But yeah, I think that there definitely was not only this idea of let's try and, capture the music genres of the time, but I also feel like there was a meta joke within that of we are actually going to just be these bands, but singing stupid songs.
There's one song they sing, I think toward the beginning, called Big Bottom. And so, of course, I kept thinking about Fat Bottom Girls by, is that Queen?
Yeah, Queen. Fat bottom girls, you make the rocket world go round.
Classic. Yeah, I love the music in this movie so much. The members of Spinal Tap, in this movie, Christopher Guest, Michael McKean, and Harry Shearer, they've actually done tours as Spinal Tap and done television appearances and things like that over the years since this movie has come out. Like, it's basically like a real band at this point. One thing I think about the use of these flashbacks to them in different eras, and this is not me, this is not an original thought by me, many other people have said this, but it does kind of show that this band is very much, there's something very artificial about them, and I don't mean in the sense that they're fictional for the documentary, but in the sense that part of the reason that this band is terrible and they're dissolving is that they're very much about just jumping on the sort of cultural and not aesthetic, but the sound trends of the era.
They don't have an original sound.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They're very much about, let's just shape ourselves to whatever is popular at the moment. And we happen to be catching them at the moment where this type of music is kind of changing, and what they're trying to do to be offensive and edgy is no longer working. And one of the things that I love is that throughout the movie, in my opinion anyway, you see that they do genuinely have talent. Like, there's that amazing scene where
the first song that they ever wrote is incredible.
Yes.
That was one of my favorite scenes in the movie, because they're sitting in this diner, and I don't know the name of Rob Reiner's character, but he asks them, what was the first song you ever wrote? And then they're like, oh no, we can't remember it. Let's see if we can remember it. And then they start doing it. And I'm like, this is actually, the lyrics are good. Mm-hmm. The sound is great. The drumming beat is fantastic. And then it literally is just entirely glossed over. Like, Rob Reiner's character just moves on to the next question as if what he heard wasn't actually the best song they've ever created. And they made it when they were, 9 years old?
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's this little song called All the Way Home, I think. It's kind of folky and, yeah, just really gorgeous. And they've had such a fruitful collaboration over the years. There's this great scene too where Nigel is playing, I think it's toward the end, Nigel's playing the piano for Marty, the director, and he's playing this really gorgeous piano piece. And he's talking about how, it's very delicate. I'm just having the sort of the notes intertwine with each other. And, I'm very inspired by Bach and Beethoven. And
it's like a mock.
Yeah, Mozart and Bach. It's a mock. And then Marty's like, oh, great. What's it called? And he says, Lick My Love Pump.
Yep.
And it's just these guys, they have this talent, and yet they're sort of craving for like adolescent attention. Just they can't get out of their own way,
Yeah, I liked how that joke kind of continued, because then we have this guitar solo that's literally a freaking, I don't know if it's Mozart or Bach, but I think it might be Mozart. But he just starts shredding.
Yes, he's playing this classical piece on the guitar, shredding. Piano. Yeah.
I'm like, what is this? Like, this is like bastardizing this song. What are you doing?
Especially after we've earlier seen him he's talking about how he feels like he can express himself artistically on stage through his solos. And we see him do this ridiculous solo where he's just kind of like, he's shredding, and then he takes out this violin and he's trying to like play the guitar with the violin, and it sounds terrible. And he's trying to sort of pluck and like swat at another violin or another guitar with his sneaker, and it just sounds awful. And it's just so much like, all the tradition of rock stars doing ridiculous things on stage and bringing out all sorts of eclectic instruments and things like that. And he's trying to do it, but he can't find a way to do that that's actually, artistically meaningful. Let's see. Yeah, so we've talked about the opening, introducing the group, their sort of history.
Well, we didn't talk about the very opening, because I thought it was really funny how in the beginning the director of the film, I'm just going to keep saying Rob Reiner's character, he goes on this whole spiel about like, hi, my name is so and so, and I'm a director. I've worked on all of these. It's like he just goes on this weird random ego trip of like, I want to make sure you guys know who I am, and I'm a quality filmmaker.
What I've heard,
like, it's just so weird. Why? This is so unnecessary.
What I've heard, and I can't verify this because I've not seen this movie, but Take This Waltz, which I mentioned before as one of the rockumentary inspirations for this movie, was directed by Martin Scorsese, and Martin Scorsese kind of inserted himself into the documentary, and so this is kind of parodying that and just taking that to an extreme. Yeah,
brilliant. Mm-hmm. I love that. That's brilliant.
Yeah, I love it. So yeah, him just being like, yeah, these guys are incredible. They're just, they're known for their loudness and their musicality and also their punctuality, which is hilarious.
This is just another note that I made, but I love how you mentioned in your kind of introduction to this that, this movie kind of follows a very failed US tour. And I wrote down specific moments when it was like, their manager is like, yeah, we're going to Philly. It's an untapped market. We don't want to oversaturate the New York music scene. It's like, okay. And then they have this like plan to go to Boston. And he's like, no, we're not going to Boston. Don't worry about it. It's not that big of a college town. It's like,
yeah, I got that too. It's so funny.
No, but all of these explanations that he keeps giving as to why they can't perform in these actually huge venues and cities are just ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, one of the funniest like things in this movie is all the way it parodies that sort of like the rock star lifestyle, and you have all these people at your beck and call to do things for you, and they all have these huge egos, and they're really childish and don't can't take any amount of criticism. And so you have Ian, their manager, and then just other people throughout the film.
He's doing a pretty good job given like the band that he's having to deal with, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, when he is defending himself in that scene later on, which we'll talk about, I'm fully on Ian's side.
Yeah.
But you have Ian and then all these other hangers on and record people that they're working with, and they're all dancing around their egos and trying to take all of the issues with sales onto themselves, even though they know it's not their fault. It's the fault that the band is just not popular anymore. But that one guy, when they're at the record signing and no one comes to the record signing, and he's just like, it's my fault. It's my fault. I'm supposed to be the advance man. I didn't get anyone here. Kick my ass. Yeah, I got the timing wrong. Here, kick my ass. Just kick my ass.
Yeah.
And you're like, they're all like, what?
I got the timing wrong. I'm like, what does that even mean?
Yeah, it's so funny.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Early on, we also discover an important part of the band lore, which is that their drummers keep dying in really bizarre ways.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that was crazy. I was like, what is this? And one of them, like, they offer no definition as to what this means, but they're just like, yeah, he just exploded. I'm like, what are you like, what does that mean? But they never define what exploded is.
Yeah. They're just like, dozens of people spontaneously combust every year,
like,
and no one really reports on it. Like, what are you talking about? The first guy, he dies in an
make it up. Like, were you tripping and you just like imagine that you had a drummer and this happened? Like, what is going on here?
And what is it? The first guy, he dies in a tragic gardening accident.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
The police said it was best left unsolved. I'm sorry. So much of this movie is going to be me describing something and then just completely cracking up on mic.
No, that's okay. I'm sure that like anyone who listens to this podcast that also loves the movie is going to be right there with you. So those are the people we're talking to. Those are the people you're talking to.
That's the people I'm talking to. No one else is going to be able to understand.
Yeah.
Again, it's 82 minutes. If you haven't seen it, pause this, watch it, then come back.
Yep.
It's so good. Anyway, yeah, their drummers keep dying in unexplained ways. At one part, Marty is interviewing their current drummer, and he's like, do you fear for your life? And he's like, well, the law of averages says it can't happen to everyone, right?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So we have the sort of launch party as they're about to head off on their tour, and this is the first time that we hear that there's an issue with their album cover being extremely offensive and sexist. And their PR, the woman who does their PR, who's played by Fran Drescher. And I was like, oh, Fran Drescher from The Nanny.
Very relevant right now, especially because she's the president of the SAG, of the Screen Actors Guild, and she's been very vocal.
Yeah, so...
When I made that connection, I was like, oh, the president of Screen Actors Guild is The Nanny? That's crazy. Because I didn't know that.
Right? Yeah, there's a lot of random... I don't even know if you can call them cameos, because I don't know where these people were in their careers. This might be like they're on their way up, and now they're much more famous, but... yeah, Fran Drescher shows up. Angelica Houston shows up. We already mentioned that Billy Crystal and I believe Dana Carvey have small roles. But anyway, yeah. So we hear that their album cover is really, really offensive and sexist, and the stores want to pull it, and the record company wants to pull it. And basically, it's this very like cynical conversation about like, if your last album was really popular, no one would care. But because your last album didn't do well, we're going to get all up in arms about this extremely sexist album cover, which we never actually see.
I don't want to see it.
It's like,
no,
thank you. But we do. I love that scene. I think it's a little bit later where Marty's just reading reviews of their previous albums, and we see the covers, and they're all the most ridiculous, pretentious things. But all the reviews are so snarky and hilarious.
My favorite review was Shit Sandwich.
Yeah, their album is called Shark Sandwich, and then the review just said Shit Sandwich.
Shit Sandwich.
Yeah, the first album is called Intravenous de Milo. It's so bad. Let me see what else is going on. So yeah, they start off on their tour, and then it's just basically various anecdotes that happen as things just kind of go off the rails for them. They're singing this one song, I think it's called Hellhole, and it's just a small thing, but Nigel is like, he's leaning backward on his guitar, and then he goes all the way down, and then he realizes he can't get up, and so you have a tech guy who comes out on tech guy wearing a really bright t-shirt too, like not in black, just in like this really bright orange t-shirt, and he's like dragging Nigel around trying to help him get up. Oh my gosh. You got the whole the scene that we quoted at the beginning where Nigel's showing off his guitar collection. He's like, these numbers go up to 11. And Marty's like, but why? And Nigel's like, because. What? I don't understand.
Don't touch the guitar. I wasn't gonna touch it. Okay, but don't get close to it. Don't talk about it. Don't think about it. Okay. Can I look at it? No, actually, no. Let's go over here now. Like, okay.
Oh my gosh.
When he asked him to hear the guitar, and he's like, I don't hear anything.
Yeah. He's like, well, if I was playing though, you would. And he's like, okay.
It's like, yes, that's how guitars work.
Yeah, so they've got issues with this hotel they go to where instead of 7 suites,
booking them 7 rooms, they give them 1 room on the 7th floor. For 14 people. And isn't that when what's his face's girlfriend really starts showing up, or is that later?
She's not shown up yet, but this is around the time that we first hear about. So David St. Humbins, he has this girlfriend named Janine who he calls him and tells him that she's gonna join them on tour. And Nigel is very unhappy about this. Nigel does not like Janine. And I was reading, I'll read later on an excerpt from Roger Ebert's review of this film. He gave it 4 stars. He really loved this film. But his interpretation of this relationship between the 3 of them is that it's sort of a love triangle where Nigel sort of has a one-sided crush on David and is kind of jealous of Janine, which I'm a little of 2 minds. I don't know if I would go so far as to call it a crush, but there is this one of the things I think that really works about this movie is that there is kind of a relationship dynamic that feels kind of real at the center of it, where Nigel and David have been working together for years. They know each other so well. They're best friends. They're musical partners. And Janine is sort of the, I guess the Yoko Ono is often the referred to term, but she's this person who's kind of come into this relationship, and she's really kind of taken over David's life and rearranged him and gotten him into all this sort of weird astrology and spirituality stuff. And Nigel's just very jealous and unhappy. And so many scenes are just Janine there saying something, rambling on about something, and Nigel's just fuming in the background.
The fact that she thinks that Dolby is Dobley, it's like, that's very wrong. It's very wrong.
No, Janine. No. Let me see. The band goes to they go to visit Graceland while they're on their tour, and they're visiting Elvis's grave, and they try to sing Heartbreak Hotel, and they're trying to do the harmony, and it sounds terrible.
Oh my God. It's so bad. It's so bad.
Oh, it's just hilarious.
Is that Elvis's actual grave?
I read somewhere that no, they had filmed the whole movie in Southern California, and so they just recreated it basically.
Okay, gotcha.
There's also the concert where they have this sort of these like clear plastic alien pod things that are supposed to open at the beginning of the song.
And one of them can't get out.
Derek, the bassist, he gets stuck and the pod won't open. And so through the entire song, he's like hammering at the pod. He's like trying to pry it open. There's like a tech guy with a flamethrower who's trying to get it. Like, I don't know what the flamethrower is going to do. And then at the very end, it finally opens and he jumps out just as everyone else is getting back into their pods.
Yep.
So ridiculous.
I really liked this little addition of Ian, the band manager, and how he has this like paddle that he like carries around for like intimidation purposes.
I think it's a cricket bat. Yeah.
And we see it. I forget what it is. I meant to write this down as a note, but it was kind of during that rapid fire round of jokes at the end or close to the end. But there's one scene where something happens. Oh, no. It's when at the end when Nigel comes back and he's like reunited with the band or whatever, and Ian is standing there behind David's girlfriend and he's holding the thing as like, I won. Like, I'm the better manager.
Yeah. I'm in charge again. I'm the captain now. Yeah. Well, there's that whole like, Marty's like, oh, you got that cricket paddle. Is it kind of an affectation? He's like, yeah. Although sometimes, I'll use it. And then it's just a montage of him like crashing
destroying
like TVs
things
to the floor and like choking people with the cricket paddle. And yeah.
Yep.
You gotta do what you gotta do when you're the manager of a band.
I guess. Yeah. he doesn't get the sex, drugs, and rock and roll. He has to deal with everything else.
For every 100 things, one thing that goes wrong, 100 things go right. And that's what he does.
Yep.
Well, speaking of which, the album has been doing poorly, and they're trying to find this new kind of look or direction. Janine has these like really ridiculous astrological like masks that she wants them all to wear that Nigel is like, no. And Ian's like, this would be really expensive.
He's like, do you know how much it would cost to have the whole band dressed as animals?
She's like, they're not animals. They're signs of the zodiac.
Okay.
But anyway, this is the scene that is just, this is the one that makes me lose it the most of all of them.
Oh my gosh. It is so absurd.
It's just mounting.
It is so absolutely absurd. I didn't even know. I was like, I don't even know how to react to this.
So Nigel has this idea that we're going to do Stonehenge. Like, we're going to do this song that's going to be themed after like Stonehenge and druids and things like that. And so he draws a little Stonehenge on a napkin and he gives it to Ian to build. And then we get this scene.
18 inches.
Yeah. He wants it 18 feet high, but he puts the little symbol for inches. So Ian is like talking to Angelica Houston, who I guess is their like prop lady. And she's got this little 18-inch high Stonehenge thing. And he's like, that's great. It looks amazing. You know, the real thing's going to be great. And she's like, the real thing? What are you talking about?
This is the real thing.
And Ian's like, oh no. And then we get the song.
Well, I love that he really tries to push it. He's like, what are you talking about? What is this? And she goes, this is exactly what I was told to do.
Yeah.
Like, this wasn't me trying to play a game or what. Like, I was told to make this thing of this
I was
size.
given this
And he's
napkin,
like,
18 inches.
Yeah, he's like, how did you know? And she's like, it was on the napkin I was given.
The blame shifting in this movie is just a thing of beauty.
I don't think any blame should be put on her. I think she's fully in the right.
Oh, no. Oh, no. But there's this, I love the fact that Ian does not in any way prepare the band for what's about to happen. So we get this entire song where they're all in cloaks and they're like, in the days of the druids.
Hundreds of years ago.
I love how Nigel's like, no one knew who they were or what they were doing. But then they're like, it's supposed to be like the coolest thing ever and like the lights and everything.
It's such a long introduction. It's so long.
And then you just see, it's such a long introduction and you're just waiting for it. And then you see this tiny little Stonehenge start to lower
from like strings that are clearly visible. Like you can see the strings. And it's not even like slowly descending down. It's like just like jumping. It's just so poorly produced.
And you just see David like staring at it with an open mouth, like he cannot believe what is happening. And then it's just like it's on the stage and it is so tiny. And then they have which is like hilarious and also very offensive, but also hilarious. They have these like little people come out dressed like, I suppose, leprechauns, and they're just like doing a jig around the Stonehenge, and it is so bad and such poor taste, and it is so funny.
And I think afterwards they were like, you know, maybe having them be the dancers further emphasizes how small the Stonehenge was.
Yeah. No, there's a great line from David afterwards. Yeah, where he's like, you know, the size of it is kind of you know, underplayed when you have a Stonehenge that's in danger of being crushed by a leprechaun. And then Ian's like, I think you're making too big a thing of it. And David's like, making a big thing of it would have been a good idea.
Isn't there a point sometime after that where someone says something like, yeah, so we're doing it again? And then David's like, fuck no, we're not doing this again. Like, no.
Yeah. It's like, he's like, yeah, Derek is like, can I raise a practical question? Are we doing Stonehenge tomorrow? And they're like, fuck no.
Have you not heard this entire conversation?
Oh my goodness. And this is where I just completely lose it.
It is so like I have no other word other than absurd. It's just
so
absurd.
It's so absurd. It's such a like ridiculous, like there are so many things that have gone wrong for this to have happened. And somehow it has. And it's just like, it's so beautiful too because of how like earnestly pretentious they are in trying to create this edgy rock music that's tapping into the long, deep magic of druids. And, it's that very like metal sort of, we're going to bring in kind of, the sort of the outcast spiritual people from the past and we're gonna like put our sort of metal edge on it, and we're gonna like this is how it's gonna be cool and artistic and unique, and they just think they're doing something here and they're just not. And then
no, it's awful.
It's so
Although
awful.
I will say I hope that they do the Stonehenge when they actually go on tour. Like I would assume they do that in real life when they go on tour. Yeah.
Oh my god.
Can I just say one moment that we jumped over that is probably something where like this was a moment where I was watching this and I was like, this is a humor right now in this moment. This joke that is being made is a Tatum joke.
Mm-hmm.
Other people probably might not find it funny, but I find it really funny. It's the scene where when they're supposed to go to that like, album release meet and greet or whatever, and no one shows up. And we have this really long sequence of like the camera kind of, panning around the room, and it's really quiet. And we just hear one of the band members blowing his nose over and over and over and over. Like the only thing we hear is this guy blowing his nose, and he won't stop. And I'm just like, what?
I forgot about that.
How long can you blow your nose for? Like,
well,
what's
there's so
happening?
many like little gags, like early in the movie, I think it might be at the launch party, Nigel and David both have like cold sores, like they both have herpes, and just never commented on. It's just no need to know what happened, just
Nope.
That's just what's going on.
Yep.
Yeah, Derek apparently has a like a really bad cold when they're trying to do that album signing. Also, we I forgot to mention earlier, but their album is finally released, and it turns out that the label, because of the offensive cover, the label decided to overwrite it and do, like, I guess the idea is to do an alternative to the Beatles' White Album, but they're doing the Black Album, and it's just a record cover that is entirely black with no writing at all.
I think it could work. I think that something like that could work if they just had the name of the band and the title of the album on it. Like the concept of having an all black album with just like simple text on it, I think that's great and it would sell really well. But the fact that there's just nothing on it, and the fact that their initial reactions are very much so along the lines of wait, but how are people gonna know it's us? Like, isn't this just gonna look like everything? Like, what, you know, they keep asking all these questions but not really finishing them. But then by the end of the scene, they're trying to like convince themselves that it's a good idea, and they're like, it's just like, it's rock and it's this and it's that, and it's
and they're like, how much more black could it be? None more black.
Yeah, it's great.
It's
great.
So good. Yeah. Well, it's like it could work in a different context, because what makes the Beatles, the White Album, work is like the Beatles by that point had this reputation where, you know, everyone knew their name. Everyone knew to expect quality from their music. Everyone was so curious about what the style they were going to use on their next album cover. To have it be just plain white and just say the Beatles, it's like that's all you need to know. And it's this sort of subversion of expectations, but also, you know, demonstrating the strength of the Beatles name and the Beatles brand, that everyone's like, even if it's just a pure white album with nothing on it, everyone's going to buy it. But the Spinal Tap does not have that reputation at this time. They have a terrible reputation.
Yep.
And so this is not going to get people excited. And
they can barely even get a larger dressing room than the puppet show.
If I told them once, I told them 1,000 times. Spinal Tap first, then puppet show. Yeah, speaking of which, actually, after the whole Stonehenge debacle, they have this huge blowout fight with Ian. Ian is defending himself. He's like, I just do what I'm told. You guys, you're the creative element of this band. You know, you tell me what to build, and I see that it's built, and like, I don't see how I can be blamed, which I'm like, I mean, Ian can probably be blamed a bit here, but also like, he is kind of the only one keeping this thing on course. So he quits, and Janine steps up to be their manager, which of course is very upsetting to Nigel and to everyone.
Well, she was gunning for his job, and then he basically said, "I'm not going to co-manage the band. Like, if you guys want to bring this girlfriend who doesn't know the difference between Dolby and Dolby sound, then I'm out. You know, I'm not going to manage. I'm not going to co-manage."
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he quits. So Janine is now doing all of the travel arrangements, and as gigs keep getting canceled, she's trying to find them new ones, and the ones she finds them are really terrible. So they go to, what do they do next? Oh, actually, we have this great interview segment with Derek, the bassist, where he talks about how he's like, yeah, Nigel and David, like, we're so lucky to have two visionaries in the band. He's like, they're both geniuses, but they're so different. They're like fire and ice. And they're like, Marty's like, so what's your own role in the band? And he's like, I'm supposed to be like kind of between them, so I guess I'm like lukewarm water.
Yep.
I just found that hilarious. Yeah, so one of their gigs falls through, and what Janine books them into is an Air Force base.
Yeah.
And you have this amazing scene where it's I think it's Fred Willard, the actor, playing this like Air Force sergeant or something like that, who welcomes them, and he keeps doing all these like really lame like dad humor. I didn't say dad humor as a pejorative. He does these like all these really lame jokes, and he's like, "Hey, my hair is getting a little shaggy. People are gonna think I'm part of the band." And they're all just like, "Why are we here?" And
Yep.
like the people dancing inside before they get there are just like, it's just very sort of gentle, like no one really knows how to dance. I love when the sergeant is like, "Yo, yeah, we're real big fans of yours. Not your band specifically, but just like the whole rock and roll genre."
Yeah, but just rock music in general. Which is like one of the most insulting things you could say. But he seems like he genuinely doesn't understand that what he's saying is insulting.
No, yeah, he's like genuinely very welcoming, and like he clearly doesn't know anything about who they are, but he's like, "Yeah, we're so happy you're here. Like, this is our at ease month where we're just gonna let down our hair a little bit and get into the groove." Like, he's so square. And then the band Spinal Tap plays this song called Sex Farm Woman, and everyone is just baffled.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It's crazy.
It's like, why did you think that this song would... this is probably the least offensive song that they have, honestly.
Maybe, I don't know, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, but this is around the part where Nigel just completely gets fed up with Janine being unable to manage the band and everything being terrible, and so he walks out. David has this like interview segment where they're asking like, "Don't you feel bad that Nigel left?" And he's like, no, I'm sure we'll be fine without them. I'm sure I'd feel worse if I wasn't under such heavy sedation.
Yep, I wrote down the same quote. I wrote down the same exact. I was like, what? Like, have you been sedated this whole time? Like, what's going on?
What is going on with David? I know, like, David is just like, the dynamics between the two of them are fascinating, because Nigel is like, he is more of the sort of like dynamic, kind of leader, and David definitely seems like someone who's maybe he's definitely more of a follower, and he's someone that maybe had issues in the past, because he talks about how like what he loves about Janine is like Janine like helped get his life together. Like he really feels like he owes it to her to kind of clean him up and figure out where he's going, what he believes in. He talks about how like, "I believe everything I read, which makes me better than people who don't believe anything." It's like, what? No, that's not better.
Yeah, he says so many contradictory statements that like, it's like two sides of the same coin, but somehow you're choosing the worst side. Like, he does that a few times.
Yeah, he's just kind of an airhead. Like, he's a talented musician, but he's kind of an airhead in certain ways.
Don't we also have a concert somewhere in here before Nigel leaves where all of them like can't find the
Yes.
stage?
Oh, when does that happen?
And they're like, "Oh yeah, go this way, blah blah blah," and then they're like, "Yeah, rock and roll, like let's go." And then it's like, "Oh wait a minute, where are we? This isn't the stage." And then someone else is like, "Oh no, it's down that way." And then they're like, "Okay, yeah, let's go, woo!" And it's like, wait, What? I think it's the other way. Turn
That's
around.
the scene that I remember most my mom describing to me before I ever saw this movie. She just found it so funny. They're just like, yeah, let's go,
It's
rock
pretty
and
funny.
roll. And then they hit a dead end and they're like, oh, okay, this way, yeah, rock and roll.
And people keep giving them the wrong directions. Like,
And they can hear the crowd. They can hear the crowd above them cheering and everything. And they just cannot figure out how to get onto the stage.
my gosh. Yep.
Oh my gosh. Let me see. Yeah, so they have they play, like, as their kind of low point, they play this after Nigel leaves. They play this amusement park where the sign says puppet show and Spinal Tap. And the stands are just almost empty. It is so humiliating.
They're so empty. I'm like, what is this puppet show? Like, is this a children puppet show? Is this an adult puppet show? Like, what is this event? I don't even know what this is. Do we know where this is at this point? Like, what city or state they're in?
It probably said, but I didn't write it down. I don't remember what it said. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just, how did they get booked into this like family amusement park? But
Janine knew a guy who knew a guy.
Yeah, probably. But
I wonder if Janine is the one keeping David sedated.
I think that's what we're supposed to assume, honestly.
Yeah. I would be more upset if I wasn't so heavily sedated. It's just such a throwaway line. Like, he just so casually says it and it recontextualizes everything. And it's like, wait, what?
Yeah. Yeah, he's very out of it. So we have this end of tour party in LA where it's like barely anyone's there. It's very like the first party is like in this cool, at the start of the tour is in this like cool New York penthouse, and like everyone there is in really fashionable clothes. And this one here is like in some sort of like hotel, at like some sort of hotel swimming pool, but it seems like other guests from the hotel are just in with the rest of the crowd. An interviewer is asking David about the end of Spinal Tap and like whether he's upset about the end, and he has this like really long rambly thing where he talks about what even is the end, and the end is like a thing that is coming, and what this is my question to you. It just makes no sense. And then Derek and David are talking about like, oh yeah, if Spinal Tap ends, we could just work on other projects, like our rock musical we've talking about, Jack the Ripper, Saucy Jack. Which, not gonna lie, I kind of want to see that. And then David's like, oh yeah, and I have this idea for an acoustic collaboration with the London Philharmonic. It's like, oh, okay.
Good luck with that.
Good luck with that, yeah. But yeah, so they're about to go on for their last show, and then Nigel returns, and it's a bit emotional. But Nigel brings the news that, hey, turns out Spinal Tap is doing well in Japan. Ian wants to come back and manage you and put you on tour in Japan. What do you say? And they're all like,
Yep.
So yeah, they play their show. Nigel comes on stage and joins them, and everything is forgotten. And then they cut to their I love how there's that dynamic that like Nigel maybe won't do it. He's like, no, I don't need to go out there. I don't want to go out there. But then he changes his mind and he goes out. Yeah, well, it is really sweet because it's like as they're playing this song called Tonight I'm Gonna Rock It, and Nigel's just watching from the backstage, and you can just see on his face like how much he misses performing with them, how much he misses David, how much he misses being a rock star. And so he comes out, and like David's like beckoning him like, come on. And so he comes out and, picks up the guitar, and they're all performing, and then cut to them in Japan doing on tour with a different drummer, by the way.
I didn't catch that.
I just caught it on this time around. It was very funny. But yeah, so they're on tour. They're doing well. They're like sold out this auditorium, and Ian's the manager again, and he's brandishing his cricket battle. And that's the end of the movie. And then we just have some like random like cut interview scenes over the end credits that are really ridiculous.
Best parts of the whole movie, in my opinion. I don't think we can do it for like copyright reasons. Also, it's really long, but part of me just wants to like play that entire sequence on the mic so people can just listen to it, because it's like there's no way for us, at least in my opinion, like I don't even know how to talk about it because it's just 5 minutes of hilarity nonsense. We have people talking about like what would their job be if they weren't a rock artist. He's like, oh yeah, I'd probably just be like someone who's like, hey, we've got this thing that could work for you. And they're like, do you think that could make you happy? Well, what are the hours? Like,
yeah.
But
the one guy who's like, as long as there are sex and drugs, like I'm fine not being a rock star.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. There's just so much there. Yeah.
So much. Yeah. Are there any other random moments that, because I kind of, skipped over a lot as I was just going through the plot. Are there any other random moments in the end or the movie it's overall that jump out to you or that you wanted to highlight or talk about?
I mean, I went through all of my notes, so.
Okay. There's that scene where they're going through some sort of metal detector to get to a show and Derek keeps setting off the alarm and then it turns out it's like...
That is such a 13-year-old boy joke. Oh my gosh. And you can tell the TSA lady is like, are you serious? Yeah. Like what is this?
He's like, it's first he takes out all the coins in his pockets and he still sets it off. And then he takes off his jacket and then he still sets it off. And then they're running the little metal detector over and it goes off over his crotch. And it turns out he has like a cucumber wrapped in aluminum foil in his pants. It's so ridiculous. Just the way that like the really kind of gross performative sexuality of that sort of rock star lifestyle. I love how during the concert scenes they're all wearing like the tightest of tight pants. Oh my gosh. And the camera keeps just like focusing in on their butts and their crotches and it's just so gross. But so funny.
I do like the wardrobe in this movie. I think the costume design is cool.
Yeah.
It fits the characters very well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like you can...
Not to mention the hairstyling, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, the hairstyle makes sense for the characters. I don't, like anything about the costuming or hairstyle in this movie, but it makes a lot of sense for like rockers of this era and like what they think would be cool. And maybe was really cool at that time. I don't really know. Let's see, other like random moments. Let's see. Oh, we didn't talk about just Nigel having a tantrum because the food in the green room doesn't make any sense to him.
Oh,
because it's all like little tiny sandwiches and deli meat that you're supposed to fold up and put on the tiny pieces of bread. And he's like, I don't understand. Like this deli meat is too big for this bread. And Ian's like very patiently trying to help him understand. And he's just like, no, I don't like it. It doesn't make any sense.
I mean, it doesn't make any sense in my opinion. I'm like, why? I'm on David's side there. I'm like, why does Ian not get it? Like, this doesn't make sense.
It also looks like it's been sitting out for like 4 hours too. It looks so unappetizing. Let's see. There's a great line where they're talking about, I forget even what they're talking about. I think it's in one of their interviews, but just one of them is like, such a fine line between stupid and clever, which really sums up this movie.
They're not wrong.
Yeah. You see. Anything else that you wanted to bring up?
I don't think so. I mean, yeah, I talked about everything in my notes. The only thing that's left is the ending scene, which I can't talk about because it's 5 minutes of just nonstop jokes.
It's just like nonstop bangers. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, why don't we move into then talking about the box office and the awards and legacy of this movie. So unfortunately, this movie was not super successful at the time, but it has really gained a cult following. It did not get any Oscar nominations, but it has been placed on a lot of lists of greatest comedies of all time, greatest scripts. The AFI has a list called 100 Years, 100 Laughs, and that's currently number 29. The WGA has a list of 101 funniest screenplays, and it's number 11 there. So yeah, there's a lot of love out there for this movie. And it was a critical hit at the time, very much so. So as of now, Metacritic has it at 92. Rotten Tomatoes has it at 96%. I mentioned before Roger Ebert gave it 4 stars in his review, and I pulled an excerpt of it, which I think sums up really well what I love about this movie. So he writes, "This is Spinal Tap, one of the funniest movies ever made, is about a lot of things, but one of them is the way the real story is not in the questions or in the answers, but at the edge of the frame. There are 2 stories told in the film, the story of what the rock band Spinal Tap thinks, hopes, believes, or fears is happening, and the story of what is actually happening. The reason we feel such affection for its members is because they are so touching in their innocence and optimism. Intoxicated by the sheer fun of being rock stars, they perform long after their sell-by date to smaller and smaller audiences for less and less money, still seeking the roar of the crowd.
I feel like Roger Ebert found a way deeper meaning here than I think the movie is actually asking you to find. I think he's digging kind of deep. I don't think this movie is really that intense, but I'm here for it.
Not intended to be that deep. I mean, I think one of the reasons that this movie has survived for so long, apart from it's just being, very funny, is it does touch something in that sense of like what it feels like to be, a rock musician or just an artist in general. I mean, I've read a lot of musicians have cited this movie as being very accurate to their own experience, or kind of, like this movie is kind of like, oh man, this is really accurate to the rock star lifestyle, and I really don't want to become Spinal Tap, that sort of thing. But I think just in that idea of, you do kind of get lost in the lifestyle, in the, your own kind of pretensions and feeling of self-importance. But there's also that alternate side of, that joy of just making music with your friends, that feeling of exciting, life-giving experience of being on stage, being adored by fans, being able to perform music that allows you to express yourself. Like this movie, because I think it really does try to be very accurate in the way that it mimics the rockumentary format. It helps you get into that mind space, and I think it really does. There's a lot of texture to it, and it brings you in emotionally sometimes in ways that you might not expect. But mostly it's just really silly and really dumb, which is also why I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, this is a shorter than average episode, but for a shorter than average movie.
Yeah, this movie is very short.
It is very short, yes. But yeah, just very silly. So if you've never seen it, go watch it. So final thoughts. Yeah, for me, this movie's, it's just hilarious. It's just so much my style of humor. Like I said before, I cannot even read through the quotes page on IMDb without cracking up at certain things. I think all the amount of creative collaboration that went into this, I did not realize until I started digging into it, but I did not realize it was such a close collaboration between those four main players: Rob Reiner, Harry Shearer, Christopher Guest, and Michael McKean. But it is great. You feel that energy, and there's so much talent on display. I think the amount of improvisation that went into it, and the musical stylings and the variety of musical styles that are used in it, I think are just really, really impressive. And, it's one of those, I feel like a lot of comedies, especially dumber comedies, Bill and Ted also comes to mind, where it's like, it does take a lot of skill and intelligence to make something this dumb, And I think that's true about this movie overall.
I would argue the same thing for Napoleon Dynamite, but I know you hate that movie.
Oh, I don't hate that movie. It's just, it doesn't really work for my style of humor. But I think there's a lot of talent that went into it. Sure, certainly.
Yeah. Oh man, I love that movie. I wanted to ask, I don't remember if you mentioned this. I know you said that this was a movie that was a family favorite growing up, but did you say how old you were the first time you saw it? Because I'm curious.
I think this is one of those movies, because it is rated R.
Is it?
It is.
I guess that makes sense.
But this is the 80s. There was no PG-13 at the time.
Okay.
So I think it's rated R mainly for language, not so much. I mean, you don't really see a whole lot. It's more just like the language and the style of jokes and what's going on and things like that. So this is, I think I was at least probably in high school when I saw this for the first time all the way through.
Okay.
I think this is one of those movies where my parents would show me scenes when I was younger, but I didn't see it all the way through until I was at least kind of older teens.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Okay. Yeah, because I was thinking, like, if you grew up watching this, I feel like if I was 8 years old, I wouldn't get it. I would just be like, this is boring.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, so for me with this movie, I mean, again, I enjoyed it. It was fun. I thought it was funny. I don't think it had as much of an impact on me because, again, I've spent hours upon hours watching things of a very similar type of, tone. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm definitely glad I watched it. I think that similar to, I think what you said about your parents, I think that this is something where I will go back and watch specific scenes for sure that I really liked. I don't know if I'll necessarily watch it from start to finish again. But yeah, I mean, I really, really love that credits interview sequence. I think it's absolutely a riot. And so, yeah, I mean, thank you for choosing this. I think it'll be a fun thing to watch clips of in the future when I need a little giggle.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really happy that we did this. It had been a few years since I'd seen it all the way through. So it was really fun to rediscover and realize that it's still as funny to me as it always has been.
I'm so glad for you. That's awesome.
All right. So, Tatum, do you want to tell the people what we're going to be covering in our next episode?
Yes. We are pivoting big time. So we have, for our last 2 episodes of October, we wanted to get a little bit Halloween themed and choose some horror films.
A little bit spooky season.
Yes, a little bit scary. So next week I've chosen for us to talk about one of my favorite horror movies, and I think it's kind of recognized as one of the best horror movies, Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974. I am really looking forward to talking about this movie. I think it's going to be, there's so much to dig into, and I think it's going to be good. So yeah, come back for Texas Chainsaw Massacre next week.
All right. Well, thank you very much for listening. Have a good day. Go watch Spinal Tap.
Yep. And also then watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's a great doubleheader.
Yes. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you want to get in touch with us, you can email us at yourpickpod@gmail.com. Our theme song was composed by Joel Rushton, and our podcast graphic was designed by Kara Shin. If you like this show and want to hear more, please rate and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. We're excited to have you on this journey with us. Until next time.